Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Whether you're members of our congregation or you're visitors, you're very welcome on this horrible evening. Feel very proud of yourselves that you've made it here tonight. Thank you. But most welcome of all to Kenneth, who we're very honoured to have. It's just lovely to have him here. He's been on the local news. He's been in the local papers. This is a celebrity we have with us here tonight. But if you think of what he's actually achieved, he cycled from Hadrian's Wall to Rome. Just think of that. Hadrian's Wall to Rome. Picture up there of him with his bike and his cello strapped to the back of his bike. And wherever he stopped, he played the cello. And just think of this, you know, and how lucky we are that he's here with us tonight. He's a poet, he's a cellist, he's a man of talent, and he's sharing tonight with us. So thank you ever so much. He's going to talk to us now and play the cello, and then afterwards we'll have a chance to think about his book and other things. So welcome. Over to you. Oh, and one more thing I need to say. On the very, very unlikely chance that we have a fire, which, as far as I know, hasn't happened in living memory here, but if it happens to be tonight, there are two ways out of church, one the way you came in, and one opposite of the steps. So use those and try not to get caught in the fire, which isn't going to happen. Okay? And have a lovely evening. Over to you, Kenneth, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Wendy, and thank you, everybody. And it's very, very lovely to be in St. Mary, Richmond. So, this is the book I've written, Highway Cello, about this mad cycle. You can't tell there, it's 40 degrees in that picture. And the book begins, this is the introduction, with a little poem. I say a poem, it's a doggerel, really. If you want the poems, you have to buy the book of poetry, which is at the back there. It's called The Cello Dare. Play it here, play it there. I'd play my cello anywhere. On the top of Snowdon? Easy. In the rain and snow then? Peasy. Simples. On a double-decker bus, there isn't room enough to bow. And the driver makes a fuss. No music when the bus has no conductor. Here's a dare then. Get you home, then pack that cello on a bike. Pedal south. Go down to Rome. Be careful where you aim its spike. Go on. Play it every day en route. In squares and streets, in parks on roofs, posh restaurants where the food's en croûte, low dives where no one gives a hoot. If you dare. Play some concerts overnight in homes, halls, churches, left and right. And if this madness doesn't fail, then back at home, write down the tale of Libre on a bike, the highway cello. Chapter 1, Over the Alps, Saturday the 25th of June. I'm 9,068 feet above sea level on the highest proper road over the Alps, 1,200 miles from home on a nearly 50-year-old Dawes Galaxy bicycle. Also on the bike, precariously, dangerously heavy and wobbly, is my beautiful black curvy, shiny companion, Libre. Libre is a cello. In the last 2 days, I've climbed a total of more than 10,000 feet. Since I left home a month ago, more than twice the height of Everest. The main thing I'm telling myself is there's no hurry. Stop as long as you like. This turns out to be good advice. There's so much to see, and it's breathtakingly beautiful. Actually, it's the climb and the altitude that are doing most of the breathtaking. I did prepare for it being a good deal cooler at 9,000 feet, but I don't think I reckoned on the shortage of oxygen. Really? Does it make a noticeable difference? Well, whatever it is, I'm seriously short of breath by the time I reach the top. Nearly 9,100 feet, did I say that already? Above sea level. For the first hour, I climb in almost perfect solitude. The mountains are beginning to open up. I stop on a stone bridge just above an overnight park-up for camper vans, where I could look down on a harmless town of Val d'Isère and up to meadows, scree, peaks, snow, ski lifts and magnificence. The air was sharp with that kind of clarity that makes you think distant summits are just a mile or two away. The stream under the Pont Saint-Charles gushed. There were flowers, tiny as befitted their alpine altitude, but with ambitiously bright colours. Two cyclists pedalled hard past me, clearly on a severe deadline. It's about then that the motorbikes began to pass me. For the rest of the day they were constant, mostly quiet and respectful, as they should be in the mountains, but occasionally loud, fast, terrifying or suicidal. Uncountable numbers of them. Why do they always hunt in packs? And a couple of touring cyclists from Sheffield, with very little luggage on nice light carbon fibre bikes, who couldn't believe what they were seeing. "See you at the top," they said, in tones of cheerful dismissal. They clearly didn't think I'd get that far. Then the first little wall of snow at the edge of the road, then bigger patches, a bit brown with accumulated wind blow, but still bright with glare. And then suddenly the col itself, a little disappointingly flat-topped, with the iconic sign, "To surprised cyclists from Sheffield," lots of bare rock and snow and tiny bright flowers, and a shuttered building that proclaimed itself a restaurant, though presumably only in the summer, which it wasn't yet. A biting wind and an urgent and sweaty need to put on every possible piece of extra clothing. The high point of the journey, 1,200 miles from home, and, I might have already said, 9,068 feet above sea level. Take that, you doubters. At the top, lots of motorbikes are parked up, and cyclists are appearing regularly from the other direction, each arrival loudly cheered, before everyone jostles for a spot to have their photo by the Col de l'Isserin sign. There's also a Vesper Society of France convention, and they're coming in droves up the other side. Several of the bikers ask if there's going to be a concert. Of course there is. I perch on one of the stones and struggle with cold fingers. In the thin air, Libre sounds weak and reedy. She's also gone very sharp. But the audience is large and appreciative, and everyone wants to video this idiotic madness. A good number sing along loudly to "My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean," without minding at all when I conduct them into my tempo, not theirs. So you also may sing along if you feel so moved. Well, if you can't slip a little bit of bark into the middle of my bonny lies over the ocean in St. Mary's, Richmond, where else could you? Now, I've slightly changed the programme this evening from what I intended because I understand there is a very important member of this congregation who, a very long time ago, was the Archdeacon of Canterbury. So, Canterbury. I've ridden 544 miles since I left home. From here, there's a proper pilgrim route to Rome, the Via Francigena, so everyone understands the concept of an arduous journey south to the Mother Church. You can't, I realise, set off from Canterbury on the Via Francigena to Rome without therefore asking yourself the question, are you a pilgrim? Am I a pilgrim? Am I a proper pilgrim? They make a big thing of the Via Francigena here, perhaps not quite as big a thing as they did before the Reformation, all that bloody anti-Rome stuff that entailed, but it's important history and shouldn't be ignored. And it's undergoing a bit of a revival as more and more people want to make their travels more symbolic, more significant, less frivolous, less guilt-inducing. Just up the hill from the ruins of St. Augustine's Abbey, pillaged by Henry VIII because he didn't like the Pope and he needed the money, is St. Martin's Church. Like most people, I didn't know it was there, but it's older and in some ways more important than the church we all go to see in Canterbury, the cathedral. It's recognised as the oldest church in England that still functions as a church. It's also the oldest parish church in England. It has real Roman elements in its construction. It's where King Ethelred was baptised after he gave up arguing with his Christian wife, Queen Bertha, about it and stopped being a pagan. It was where St. Augustine first set up shop when he arrived from Rome in 597, and before he built his ruined abbey and started on a cathedral and became its archbishop and then a saint. I could go on. It's that important. It's so important that if you want a certificate that says you're a proper pilgrim on your way to Rome and entitled to stay in pilgrim hostels in France at slightly less than commercial prices and can go straight to heaven without passing go, etc., if you die on the way, this is where you have to go to get it. Might be useful, I thought, and what harm could it do? Like the diplomatic passport you keep in an inside pocket, but only show in emergency because you're actually on holiday. Only St. Martin's Church was locked, and they weren't issuing pilgrim passes that day. With the bishop's permission, I've wheeled the bike into the cathedral and propped it against a pillar. Have you cleared this with security, they want to know. I reassure them without telling any untruths. I'm due to play during the midday service, which I will take as a suitable blessing on me and Libre before we sail across the Channel tomorrow. Meditation by Frank Bridge seems appropriate. This is a big place, a seriously big place. It's overwhelming and awe-inspiring. You could play football in here, perhaps even cricket if the windows weren't so precious and expensive. It's big, but the acoustic for playing a cello is magnificent. Do you want a microphone? The canon asks. I do not. I'll show you what Libre can do. There are about 13,000 square feet of stained glass in Canterbury Cathedral. A lot of it is 12th century. The cathedral even has a director of stained glass to oversee it all and organise its maintenance. One of the director's favourite windows depicts Methuselah, grandfather of Noah. In another 100 years, that window will be as old as the Bible tells us Methuselah was when he died, 969. That's old, even for a window. You need big adjectives to describe a cathedral like Canterbury. And here I am, playing my cello. If you look at the pictures, you can hardly see me, a tiny dot in the middle of it all. But you could hear Libre. I'm sure she was taller when we finished. After the short service, the congregation transforms. It becomes an audience. There are a few of those rolling hand gestures that usually mean and. We've paid and we want our money's worth. "Play on, Macduff." I look round for the canon, but he's gone. He can't say yes, but he can't say no either. So I play. And this is what I started with in Canterbury Cathedral. This is Meditation by Frank Bridge, which I also played a couple of days after I'd got over the Channel. I played at a Commonwealth War cemetery near the Somme. This is Meditation by Frank Bridge. Thank you very much. Saint-Quentin, page 182. We've moved on, haven't we? Right, so I've just played that piece again in the Commonwealth War Cemetery. So that's the context of where we've got to. I pedal on, not uplifted by the sunshine or the larks. I get to Saint-Quentin in time, following a line of sight to the monstrously large basilique. I'm surveying the restaurants round the square, looking for lunch. The last one seems the most promising. One of its customers, a gentleman with white hair and a very smart jacket, hails me. "A cello on a bike! Bravo! Ha ha! Come and play for us." So of course I do. I'm plied with drinks and a couple of plates of amuse-bouche. I play James Bond, which gets a wider audience, then the Swan, which goes down very well, and then Frank Bridge's Meditation again. I'm being pressed by the smart jacketed gentleman to stay in his hotel, but we settle on a lunch there instead. So he phones his wife at the hotel to say he's got a guest, and off we go. The Hotel des Canonnières, dating mostly from the 18th century, is an architectural gem. It's a boutique destination owned and run by Gilles and Marie-Paul, with a real small cannon in the garden, and Gilles' splendid Morgan parked in a three-sided courtyard out front. They bought it as a family home decades ago, and when the family grew up and went away, they turned it into a hotel. Gilles, before he retired, was an accountant and clearly very good with money. He shows me some of their rooms on the ground floor of the hotel, full of a lifetime's interesting things. He has a model sailing boat, a lot more than just a dinghy. The real one is in a little harbour near Calais. The other two, he says, are further south. Gilles is an enthusiast. Before he was an accountant, he was a cyclist. Here are a dozen silver trophies, arranged in descending order of size, and a framed black and white photograph showing him nearly at the front of a very serious-looking race. He still has a fine bike or two. We eat in the garden, which requires an umbrella against the sun. Marie-Paul, operating out of a kitchen that isn't at all to the same scale as the rest of the house, seems not disconcerted that lunch for two had to stretch to 3. My coming, they both said, was a gift from God, after they couldn't go to a granddaughter's first communion in the basilique this morning. After foie gras, a stew from heaven, and wine and cheese, there's barely time to photograph Gilles beside his cycling prizes and Marie-Paul at the door of the hotel before he wheels me across town to the Gallery Saint-Quentin. Saint-Quentin is one of those towns I'd written ahead to. Where in Saint-Quentin could I play, I'd asked, and they put me in touch with the Gallery Saint-Quentin. I didn't know anything more except that I'd arranged with the gallery to be there at 3 o'clock, and there was a small walled garden I could play in if the weather was fine. I thought probably I'd be playing to a few random gallery visitors. So it's a bit of a surprise when we pedal up to the front door at 5 to 3, nearly sober, to find a modest crowd assembled by the door and an organizer looking suddenly relieved. There are posters in the glass shop front advertising the opening of the 90th anniversary exhibition. The posters show a photograph of the cellist who would perform the concert to mark the opening. I was apologizing for being late, Gilles was explaining that I was a gift from God, and the audience was in the mood for fun. It was a local amateur artists association that ran the gallery and was celebrating its 90th anniversary. So in the nature of these things, some of the work was strikingly good, and some of it wasn't. Pride of place was given to a painting by Jean Lallemande, a local artist who'd made good and who had a letter from Buckingham Palace to prove it, and whose work was once featured on a French postage stamp. There wasn't time to see any of this yet, though. I wheeled the bike through the gallery, out into the walled garden, guided by Hélène, the prime mover in it all. There are more people waiting in the garden, sitting in the sun or the shade according to their complexions. On with the show. I raced through the first half, and in the interval for refreshment and general mayhem, discovered that the 12-year-old in the audience played the violin. His father needs no encouragement to run home and get it, so we open the second half with one of his pieces accompanied on the cello. This was the first time, he said, he'd played in public, and he definitely wants to do it again. Half the audience is already on its feet, because there weren't enough chairs, so I get the rest up, and they dance to Bach minuets and Irish jigs and whatnot, and would have gone on all night, I think. But the carpal tunnel syndrome I had operated on a couple of years ago is being seriously aggravated by the combination of bike and cello, and it hurts to play. This, I feel, might become a serious problem, and I need to be careful. I should give proper attention to the exhibition itself. André, Shadows and Chaperones. I admire Hélène's work, which stands out, and a couple of other pieces. Ah, yes, says André, that's the teacher. Everyone pauses to clap me out of the building and back on the bike to weave my way across town to my warm showers hosts, Gaëtan and Fleur. Hélène and André also invite me to stay, so Saint-Quentin is officially, by my personal designation, the most hospitable town in France. That designation is reinforced by an evening with Gaetan and Fleur and their student daughter and friend. When it comes to the cheese, we jestingly debate England v France. We know how to do it too, I'm trying to say. Have you ever tried a proper cheddar, or a real Stilton, or Cornish Yarg, or Shropshire Blue, or Stinking Bishop, or Parlick Fell, or a Red Leicester, or an Old Wensleydale? Clearly, I'm not going to win this. So I concede that we aren't quite so good as the French at soft cheeses, but that my real favourite is an old Comté. Equally graciously, they get out their best Comté and add it to an already full cheese board. And this, says Gaetan triumphantly, opening a half bottle of quite old Vin Jaune, is what you drink with it. Before the daughter's friend plays some Chopin on the piano and I get Libre out for the fourth performance of the day. So, something you can dance to. Since not very many of you sang when I said you could sing, you'll just have to dance, won't you? I heard one or two little voices, but, you know, this is a church, come on. I heard you singing this morning. Right, this is not a Bach minuet or a jig. In fact, it's a reel, and it comes with a health warning, or actually a performance warning, because I have to be very careful not to get too fast and trip over myself. The College Groves, it's called. Let us wait for the bells. Does it chime as well? No chimes. Perhaps it's got wet. College Groves. I don't know what time it thinks it is. Chapter 32, La Fête de la Musique, Tuesday the 21st of June. I'm nearly at the top. It's not much more than a heart side, really. I don't know what I was making a fuss about. A pale blue car that's clearly seen a number of French summers is trying to drive beside me, gesticulating Frenchly. This is risky for both of us. The road is narrow, with a few sudden and narrower tunnels and the occasional hairpin bend, and a few freewheeling vehicles coming the other way. Somehow I know it will pull in where there's more space and wait for me. I don't mind a good excuse to stop. Philou is very excited to see me. "Come for breakfast at the top of the hill. We're musicians too, and we also travel by bicycle," he shouts. "But I've never seen anything like this. Respect!" How could I refuse such an invitation, even so soon after breakfast? So I pedal sternly to the top of the col, which is a little further than I would have liked it to be when I'm showing off to Philou how quickly I ascend these little hills. Philou has waited. He sets off along a rocky dirt track, and I'm expected to follow. By the time he has to abandon the overworked car and strike out across a field, I'm beginning to have second thoughts. I think Philou senses my hesitation. He takes hold of the bike to push it himself and cheer us on. Soon, it's like entering a Robin Hood enchantment. There are caravans among the trees, though I can't imagine how they got there. Clearings with fire circles and old armchairs, and what looks like a few bodies in sleeping bags. Philou is summoning the merry men and a couple of women, and by the time we reach his yurt at the end of the encampment, it's generally come to life. It's a beautiful yurt, big, well organised, with a proper wooden floor, a serious stove, and enough insulation to survive a winter in the hills. Everyone seems to be helping themselves to breakfast in a sleepy way, and there's general consternation, search parties are dispatched, that the English visitor should have proper coffee and not their usual decaffeinated apology. So while they're doing that, I go back to the parked up bike and fetch Libre. We play an Irish lament and a song of the birds, by which time nearly a dozen young musicians have materialised with their instruments, including a sousaphone, and I can drink the proudly found caffeinated coffee to the accompaniment of a half-dressed New Orleans sound. There's something anarchic and wild, almost prelapsarian about it all. The music is free, and although it wouldn't be polite to ask if the love is free too, these people really could be a bunch of medieval outlaws, hidden away, just making occasional musical raids into the towns and villages, and then retreating to their hideouts. They call themselves les oiseaux de trottoir, the sidewalk birds, because that's where they mostly play. Sometimes there are 20 of them, which would quite block the trottoir, I imagine. But I must on, there's another hill to climb, and it's more than 60 miles to Albertville, via a lake which will have to be swum in, and where, due to a mistake, I have 2 concerts to play. So the Song of the Birds, which is what I played first for them. This is a very important piece for cellists. That very, very great cellist Pablo Casals played it at every one of his concerts when he was in exile from General Franco. In protest against Franco, he said, "I'm going to do this until Franco goes." Unfortunately, Pablo Casals died 3 years before Franco, but this made Mr. Franco very cross. The Song of the Birds. I'm wondering if there's a little bit of feedback from these speakers when I play. So I can't really tell from here. Is it all right? Okay. Page 261. Play it like Yo-Yo Ma. Marco is not especially encouraging. It's up and down all the way to Recco, he says. Then there's a big hill where you cut off the Portofino Peninsula and down again to the coast at Rapallo. More hills and back to sea level here, he says, tracing back and forth on the map. And then, after the flat, built-up coast road to Sestri Levante, well, there's your problem. I can see it on the map. It's a proper hill with only one small road, because, of course, you can't, and wouldn't anyway, take a bike on the tunnelled motorway. And, Marco warns me, there's nowhere to stay anywhere along those 30 kilometres. You can't get over that hill and all the way back down to civilization in one day. And if I stop before I get to the hill, I protest, I won't then be able to get over it and all the way to Pisa the next day. He shrugs. That's what I'm trying to tell you, he says, like a patient teacher whose pupil has just grasped the offside rule. I've no solution by the time I set off in the morning. After a month of cycling, I realise I'm on the verge of exhaustion. Yes, I've got muscles I didn't have before, but there's an accumulation of fatigue. I'm good for a sprint, but not really for a marathon. I just have to see how the day goes and hope a solution presents itself later. I'm a short way down the hill from Norma and Marco's lovely house in the heights of the Genoan suburbs when suddenly I hear someone shouting my name. It's such a surprise, I nearly fall off the bike. Again, that's twice in 2 days. It's Marco and Norma on a nifty motorbike, on their way to a swim before Norma has to go back to her exam paper marking. Follow me, Marco instructs, and sets off at full speed, weaving through the Genoan traffic as though we're late for a very important meeting. Here comes the sprint. Marco makes absolutely no concession to my absence of motor. The road to the coast, I've already discovered, is more convoluted than I expected, so I do want to keep up with him and not get lost. There's only one way to deal with the Italian traffic. Whatever you intend to do, excuse me, it has to be done with absolute conviction. You have to proceed with an aura of divine authority. Rules you have to proclaim and demonstrate do not apply to a bicycle conveying a cello. I don't want to stop in Sestri Levante except briefly under the shade of an ice cream umbrella. It isn't far enough. I've made a decision. I'm going to tackle the hill and sleep under a hedge if necessary. I like comfort at the end of the day, so this is a big decision. Stony ground, biting insects, and who knows what else, but I'm resolved. I carry on. I can get further, possibly even to the top. And I would have done, really, if Franco hadn't beguiled me. A man with the long silver ponytailed hair of an old pirate is standing by the open door of a dingy bar, watching the world go by as though he's seen it all before. He smiles at a cello on a bike and nods imperceptibly in the direction of the sign that advertises his restaurant and rooms. Decisions are made in moments. So now here I am, sitting in the bar, which really only looked dingy because I was outside in the full sun, with the bike parked up in the spare dining room, waiting for Franco and his chef to finish their dinner so I can have mine. Luca, a rugby player on holiday from Milan, has translated a few difficulties. He's staying at his wife's sister's house, that white one there, where I should stop in for a drink, he says, pointing, and afterwards he's coming back to hear me play the cello. Do I play Irish music? He used to coach an Irish team and he loves Irish music. He's as good as his word. A couple of hours later he returns. He brings a present with him, a painting of the cellist in action. After we've had coffee and I forget what else, he makes a special request. Bach, Suite No. 1 in G major, the way Yo-Yo Ma plays it. It might not have been quite how Yo-Yo Ma would have rendered it, but I think it was passable, and the terrace restaurant applauds appreciatively. Everyone here likes the idea of the English cellist on his way to Rome. It's late before we exhaust the nuances of all the recent rule changes in rugby, and I sleep with the windows wide open to the sea breeze coming up from way, way below. And to think, I might have slept under a tree and never met Luca, or been surprised by the David restaurant where they gave me stewed rabbit with an explanation I couldn't understand, or played Bach like Yo-Yo Ma, looking across to Corsica, fading into the sea at the end of the day. So I'll have to play you. You're ahead of me there, Wendy. Right. Have we got time for one more? Yes. There you go. Okay, last one. Chapter 42, I'm in Rome. I should say, by the way, I met somebody else this evening who cycled from York to Rome. Anna. Yes. She looks a bit mad, doesn't she? I'm in Rome. Technically, you might say, the Vatican isn't Rome at all. It isn't even actually Italy, but let's not quibble. It was Terence who gave me the idea. Are you going to play for the Pope? He asked, as he snipped the hair that was a good deal greyer than when I'd last seen him just before COVID. Well, you should. That was a few days before I left home, and Rome seemed a long, long way off. So I haven't given any thought to a symbolic arrival. But why not? Not the Pope himself, perhaps, but I really should try and play in St. Peter's Square, shouldn't I? I don't think I've ever cycled so fast until I had no choice and had to cycle faster. The roads are confusing. There are too many road signs, and I don't know what they all mean. Without warning, I find myself in a tunnel on a road that looks as though it shouldn't allow bicycles. It's dark. It's terrifying. If bikes, as I suspect, aren't allowed, I just won't be seen. Being overtaken is likely to be a terminal experience. So I have to strobe my lights and go at the same speed as the traffic. Fortunately, it's downhill. Then I'm spewed out, blinking and shaken into the daylight. I could be anywhere. But wait, the map says I've come in more or less a straight line and in exactly the right direction. Vatican City is just over there, and I'm early. There's no committee. If you don't ask, you don't get. So I approach the Carabinieri, 4 of them, chatting outside their van with a soldier, his finger on the trigger. We don't have jurisdiction, they agree. You have to ask the police. I don't have to look for the police when I return to the bike propped against the colonnade where it shouldn't be. There are half a dozen of them, wondering to each other whether they should arrest it. I suddenly remember that moment in London when I might have been shot. No properly alert security force is going to think there's a cello in that cello case. They'll be looking for the detonator. So I ask, I've come from Hadrian's Wall. Yes, on the bike. Yes, with the cello. Please, could I play for 5 minutes in the square, a fitting end to the journey? We don't have jurisdiction, one of them says. That's another country. You have to ask the Vatican State Police. So where, I wonder aloud, might I find the Vatican State Police? You don't. I call them for you. Show me your documents. So with my passport open in front of him, he rings his office and explains the unusual request. Normally, of course, this isn't allowed. But in your case, I think they might say yes. 10 minutes later, the yes arrives. A phone call, followed not far behind by a large but ununiformed Vatican official. The policeman from the neighbouring country, and now joined by a couple of colleagues, holds onto my passport until I finish playing. He hands it back with a broad smile. Complimenti, he says. Welcome to Rome. So I've played my cello in St. Peter's Square outside the Vatican. My arrival has been officially filmed in a homemade kind of a way and should appear on the BBC later by way of proof. I've arrived, and in 1,800 miles and 40 days, I haven't had a puncture. I'm going to lie down. So this is how I felt when I'd arrived. very much. I think you need a drink after that, don't you? You could even buy a book if you're feeling. Oh, yeah, I forgot that.
But we forgot, I'm afraid, that you now have an opportunity to ask questions. Wasn't that wonderful? Oh, wow. Coming out in the rain tonight was worth it, wasn't it? And I don't think we missed you, Omar, at all, did we? Makes you want to learn the cello, but maybe not cycle through into Rome or go up those hills. So an amazing story. Thank you. That was just lovely. Thank you. But Kenneth has said he's happy to answer questions. So if you have any, I will bring the microphone to you so that everybody can hear. So if you'd like to put your hand up, I will race round. Andy would like to ask a question. So hang on a sec.
Thank you, Kenneth, for a very nice recital and talk. On your travels, you went through all the different countries, which must have been different climates and whatever, and humidity. Did that affect the cello at all, or did you have a wooden cello, or what happened? Thank you.
Libre is a most amazing cello. Libre is made from carbon fibre. I realised I could not take a proper cello. You couldn't possibly put a real cello on the back of a bike. It would be bounced to bits in half a day. You certainly couldn't play it in the Italian sunshine. Libre can get too hot to touch in the sunshine, and she doesn't mind in the slightest. The only thing she didn't like was being at the top of the Col de l'Isran, where it was very cold when she went a bit sharp. That's the only thing she didn't mind. She's just wonderful. I love her.
Thank you. Anybody else like to ask anything?
I guess carbon fibre, it's not very heavy, but with the case and the special rack, was all the luggage on the front to stop you doing wheelies?
Yes, it was quite heavy. There's a little bit in the book where I'm doing what the lawyers call distinguishing between myself and the Tour de France. And I worked out that the weight of my setup was about 6.5 times the weight of a Tour de France bike. And also that I was 2.25 times as old as the average Tour de France winner. And that in a day I cycled half as far as the Tour de France normally goes on average and took twice as long over it. No, sorry, not twice as long. I went at half the speed. A bit less than half the speed. But yes, actually this Libre is very slightly heavier than my real cello. Very slightly, not much, just a little bit.
I looked up the average age of Tour de France champions on Google.
Shush, be quiet. Take the microphone away from that lady. Oh, dearie me.
Kenneth, that was a story wonderfully told and a cello wonderfully played. Thank you so much. All kinds of practical things I'd like to ask, but let me ask a different kind of question. You told us a bit about what you learnt about Libre. What did you learn about yourself from doing this?
Trust a bishop to ask the difficult question, eh? It's a very good question, and there's quite a lot about this in the book, because you have to ask such questions. You have to spend a lot of time on the bike thinking about what you're doing and why that you're doing it. You know, and it's not a simple thing, but in a way it's a distillation of the questions we ask ourselves, or maybe we should ask ourselves every day. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Because every day is a day that, you know, is the moment that we live and doesn't come again. And I thought of lots of answers to these questions. What did I learn? And I decided at one point, when I couldn't think of a really good reason for having set out on what I was doing, that what I was doing was, this was a work of art. I made very clear there are no capital letters. It's a very, very modest work of art, But, you know, I'm playing the cello in a particular place to a particular audience. The music is there, and then it's gone. And like my favourite artist, Richard Long, who makes things with stones and water and sometimes snow, and so they don't last very long. They disappear in the landscape. He makes them in places where nobody will see them very often. That's kind of what our life is. It's a work of art which is there and then it's gone. And at the end, I wanted to, I thought, you know, I've got to give a proper answer to this question. It's not a proper answer, but I concluded that the question, what on earth am I doing, is actually the same question, just a very, very slightly different word order as, what am I doing on earth?
Lovely, thank you. Any other questions? No. Oh, yes.
How did you come up with her name? How did you come up with her name? Everybody wants to know.
There are two whole chapters about that.
Right, okay.
Because the first chapter is called Cellos Are Complicated, and the second chapter about it is called Cellos Are Very Complicated. You do not name your cello. Anyone who is a cellist will know this. You have to wait for your cello to reveal his or her name to you. And some cellos don't. They won't. Most cellos, I believe, for reasons I'm not going to explain, are male. But Libre is not. Libre is a lady. There are no obvious signs, of course, but it took, I had Libre for some time before she said, you have to treat me like a lady because that's what I am. And then she told me her name, and I think, I'm not completely sure, but I think her name derives from the fact that she's, if you're in France or in Spain, she's made of carbon fibre, so fibre, libre, and in French and Spanish and such like foreign languages, libre is about freedom, being free. I think that's what her name is about.
That's beautiful. Thank you very much.
I may have missed this in your introduction, but how much cycling had you done before you undertook that epic ride?
Well, you might have heard my reference to Hartside. I don't know, since you live on this side of the Pennines, you might know that Hartside is the most important climb over the Pennines from the right side on the coast-to-coast route, and I live right at the bottom of Hartside. I live at 600 feet above sea level, and the top of Hartside is 1,900 feet. And in 4.5 miles, you can climb 1,300 feet. So that was my training, and I started 6 months before I set off, I think, but basically. Yes, the bike's 50 years old.
50?
I've had this bike since it was new.
It's 50.
Yes.
I have a Galaxy. I think it's about, 25 years old, 30 years old? It's been around Kerala in southern India.
Has it? Well, I want to hear about that later.
Anybody else? No. Well, I think those were very good questions, so well done. We've learnt more, haven't we? So thank you. What a lovely evening. And you can hear the rain raining outside, and we've been in here having a lovely time. And aren't we honoured? You know, somebody who's played in front of the Vatican comes and plays in Richmond for us. So thank you. Can we have a big round of applause?
Thank you very much.
Now, if I now explain what we're going to do from now on, at the back there are books and CDs, and Kenneth will happily sign the books when you pass over your money. If you have cash, that's fine. If not, we can get a card reader. So do go and have a look at the books. Have another chat to Kenneth as well, because he's here for a while and it's lovely to have him. There's also a glass of wine or a soft drink, if you'd like that. The table's at the back, so you can have a sit and a chat to one another. But there are 2 buckets which are for donations, which will go to Kenneth to say thank you for coming tonight. If you'd like to give something to the church as well, which would be wonderful, there's a card reader on a big table at the back. If you'd like to use a card to give something to church, you can alter the amounts on it. It's not stuck on what it's set on. And I think that's possibly all. But thank you so much for coming. We've had a lovely evening. And mainly thank you to Kenneth for coming and just being such a lovely presence. Terrific book. So, do go and have a look at the book. And if you're ever in this way again, come play for us again. So, thank you.